Good morning. Happy Monday. I hope you're off to a good start of the week. I am going early today in my Facebook Live because it is a travel day. I'll be getting on the road here pretty soon, but I didn't want to miss going live today. And today I have an interesting topic. And I'll get to air conditioning in a moment. But you probably came across the recent publication from Mario Draghi, who is a former president of the European Central Bank. He was tasked with writing a detailed report on the economic competitiveness of Europe, or lack of competitiveness. And he came up with some really startling results. And what he said is, look, Europe has failed to grow at the same rate as other countries, especially the United States. And in fact, on a per capita basis, real disposable income in the US has grown at twice the rate of the EU since 2000. And so he's going, why? Why are we becoming fiscally slowed down or retarded? That's my word, not his word. And he came up with a few things. And here's was the concern. The EU has not created a company that had a market capitalization of over 100 billion euros in the last 50 years, meaning it hasn't created any mega companies. We've heard in the news about, in the US, the $1 trillion company, $2 trillion company. Well, Europe hasn't, given birth to any great new companies in 5 decades, and the birth rate of companies overall in the EU is really down. And so there's a bunch of structural problems with how the economy is set up that Mario was trying to solve. And one of the structural problems, by the way, is that population in the EU is falling at 2 million workers a year. And the fewer workers you have, the lower your GDP. So all those are challenges that Mario and the leaders in the EU are trying to solve. But I came across an article in A Wealth of Common Sense by Ben Carlson. That's a great newsletter. I put a link to it in my show notes. And what the article is about is how if you were going to try to impact productivity in a country, the number one way to do it is probably air conditioning. And he makes a pretty compelling case that air conditioning has been the greatest invention in the last 100 years for productivity and quality of life. Now, before I start to make my argument, check this out. So, if you look at this, the percentage of homes with air conditioning across the globe, Japan leads the globe with 91% of homes in Japan have air conditioning. In the United States, it's 90%. In Korea, it's 85%. In Saudi Arabia, it's 63%. Now, that seems crazy. It should be 100% in Saudi Arabia. In China, it's 60%. But then from there, it falls off a cliff. In Mexico, only 16% of the homes have air conditioning, and in Brazil, only 15%. In Indonesia, 9%, South America, 6%, and India, 5%. But you know where Europe falls? Only 10% of the homes in Europe have air conditioning. And when we say homes, it kind of is the same reflection for businesses, really low percentage. At the same time, the European continent is experiencing the fastest global heating of any continent on the globe. So it's getting much hotter in Europe faster than other places. And what Ben, as well as the Dr. Torsten Slok argues, as well as other people, the best way to increase productivity is start putting in more air conditioning. And in in the article, which I posted here in my Facebook Live, in the show notes, they quote Singapore's founding father, Lu Kuan Yew, and he credits air conditioning being the main driver for Singapore's dominance in economic dominance. But they've become one of the most prosperous countries in the world, and it's because when he became president, he put air conditioning everywhere. And what he said is, look, in my country, it used to be you could only work in the early mornings or late at night when it had cooled off. You couldn't work during the day; it was just too hot. But as soon as we put air conditioning everywhere, productivity skyrocketed. And that's not the only time. Back when air conditioning first kind of came widespread, the United States put air conditioning, the United States government put air conditioning on all their federal offices through the 50s and 60s. And a study found that productivity increased 24% if somebody worked in an office with air conditioning. And by the way, productivity gains were similar if you had air conditioning at home because you got a better night's sleep. You were more relaxed. You got to work, you're more productive. And so think about that now. Do you work in the air conditioned office? If not, maybe you should think about it, right? Maybe you should think about next office you have has air conditioning. Now, what's really interesting too is air conditioning has other impacts, it's both social and economic, because what's happened is where air conditioning is really prevalent, then you have a migration into that area. So places where people wouldn't normally live, like all the big mega cities in the tropics today, that's happening because of air conditioning. And here in the United States, by the way, you know how we see it? You would not have the mass migration to the south without air conditioning. And the South, by the way, has the most air conditioning per capita in the United States, if I remember right. But like the migration to Florida, the migration to Atlanta, all those, even to Texas, that wouldn't happen without air conditioning. And so that's having a huge impact, not only on the local real estate, the local economy, on voting power. It has a huge impact. And who would have known? I love finding things that, the correlation of things we don't correlate. Air conditioning is one of the major drivers of productivity. Isn't that really interesting? And then going back to the EU, they have to solve that. That's one of the things, here in the United States, we're having a record number of company bursts. That's new companies starting. From the pandemic, now they're not necessarily all big companies, but there are more company starts in the last 6 months than we've had ever, if I remember right. Isn't that something? So, entrepreneurship, strength in the economy is really good here in the United States. Maybe it's underpinned by air conditioning. Certainly doesn't hurt. Anyways, the thought for today, today's thought is the impact air conditioning has on the world economy, on countries, on homes. Here in the United States, we're at 90% air conditioned, and so we're pretty productive. I hope you guys have a cool day, and I will look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.